Hello, and welcome to Virtually There with the Momentary. My name is Cynthia Post-Hunt, and I'm the programmer of theater and dance. And today we are here in conversation with Marilyn Arsem, Sinéad O'Donnell, Paola Paz Yee, and Molati Suryodarmo. Tonight's Virtually There invites 4 world-renowned performance artists to be in conversation together. The Virtually There series was created as a way for you, our audience, to get to know our artists on a deeper level and to learn more about their processes. As a prelude to the Inverse Performance Art Festival, we would like to share a bit of our rich, globally connected network of performance artists with you. We'll begin with introductions from each artist, and then we'll move into a conversation. Marilyn, Sinead, Paola, Melati, welcome.
Okay. I begin?
Yes, one.
Okay. Okay, you can hold it there for a moment. I just want to start by thanking Cynthia Post-Hunt and the Momentary for hosting this discussion. I'm really delighted to be talking with these 3 artists whose work I really greatly admire. I am going to show 3 images of durational work of my own and talk about how I use time differently in each of them. I think of performance as a way of thinking. It's a conversation between myself and a location, its history, the people who are there, and using materials that are abundant locally. I've made many kinds of performances over the years, but increasingly I've been making work using extended time, simply to consider how we actually occupy time. The first image I'm showing is called Undertow from 2005. It took place on the waterfront of Valparaiso, Chile, where you always smell seaweed in the air. The festival was in a former refrigerator warehouse for seafood. I covered the floor of my room with seaweed, filling the trough down the middle of it with water and salt. And I slowly rolled down the length of the room and back through the seaweed over and over again, allowing it to wrap around my body and to encase me. I was thinking of the dictators in the region who flew political prisoners out over the ocean, pushing them out of the planes to die. They could always say that they were alive when they last saw them. The second image is from my Marking Time series and was the first one that I did in 2012. I covered the room of a long gallery in baking flour. The room was 55 feet, like 20 meters long. And I started at one end with 2 chairs and took 8 hours to move down the length of the gallery and leave through the far door. I tried to bring the chairs with me, but eventually I did leave them behind. The audience watched through a doorway from my starting point as I moved further and further away from them. The trail left in the flour was a drawing or a kind of map. I was thinking about the empty time that stretches endlessly ahead of each of us. The third image that I'm showing is, back again. Yeah, there it is. The third image is from The Cure, which I did in 2013. This festival was on the grounds of a 19th century tuberculosis sanatorium that was no longer operating. I moved a bed into the woods and lay in it with my eyes closed, breathing the fresh air and holding out my hand. If someone took my hand, I whispered to them to come closer and asked if they would tell me about the future. I was thinking about how to keep on living. Even with the pandemic, I remain committed to a life practice that is anchored in the here and now and in the presence of witnesses. It keeps me grounded in the limits of my body and in the reality of time, and reminding me always that nothing remains. Thank you.
Thank you, Marilyn. Thank you, Cynthia. And I'm very honored to be here with my female colleagues from all over the corner of the world. And I'm very happy to be here together and at this moment. Um, my name is Melati Suryodarmo. I live now in Indonesia. I moved back to my home country after living around 20 years in Germany. And I started to have like a new beginning to be more with society in my home country and to try what I can do for people instead of just for art. My practice is based on uh, my body and my memory and how I relate my being with the history of mankind, the history of our culture, my culture especially, and how it all affects to my perceptions of time today. The first work I'm showing here is I'm a Ghost in My Own House. It was performed for the first time in 2012 in Bandung, Indonesia. It is a 12 hours performance where I grinded charcoal and just grinded charcoal repeatedly for 12 hours without break. This idea was started 7 years before 2012, where I made research and observed many homeless people in many places in the world I visited. I observed the being homeless. I observed how I was homeless in terms of my mental, and the loss of feeling having identity of culture, and the lost feeling of having even my home. And this relates with my interpretation about what is being well for many people in this world, and what it also has related when we are dying, or when we so charcoal symbolizing the circle of this living energy. The second word, the second work is I Love You, that I perform since 2007 and repeatedly in many years after. This is a 5 hours performance where I carried a sheet of glass, tempered glass, and move with the glass all the time for 5 hours. And I was repeating the praise I love you uh, during the 5 hours. This was performed the first time at the EBAN Festival in Barcelona. And here I was trying to figure out what was the meaning of language. And I like it to merge with the process of saying, of repeating itself. Repetitions is always very important. Repetition of actions in one work is very one of the key method that I'm using. I'm referring also to the traditional Indonesian method of traditional ritual, like in dance or in the music, that the repetition will bring our presence or our existence or our mind into another layers. Next work is one of my last work. which is transactions of hollows. Uh, for the first time, it was commissioned and performed at the Lilith Performance Studio, Malmö. I shot 800 arrows into the white wall from my white bow. So I learned how to shoot, especially because I was interested to have the memory of my father when he was teaching me to focus, because I was not a focus person as a child. So he told me how to focus by playing archery and dart. So then I actually in this work I was talking about utopian world where we are as a society in our political life are mostly engaged with our dreams, and we want all to be the world to have better. We want to improve our nations, and we are focusing on the future that we still cannot see. We never can see the future. We only can predict. So shooting the arrows into the white wall is an action that for me, as a member of the society, I'm involved in this collective spirit of searching of something in the future, that is offered by many of governments or politicians, where we also don't know where we will be landing. The public is coming with me around, and the shooting is creating instinctively how people feel fear and want to protect. So it's like in the room, public will move and protect themselves. They move normally behind my back when I was shooting. Thank you.
Hello. I want to thanks to the institution and to say to everyone that I am very happy to share this panel with all the guests. And I will make an introduction of my work based on the 3 photographs I choose. First, I will read a small statement. I approach my artistic work through the body inside a poetic space inscribed in the here and now, where the plastic language, meditative and real life exercise converge and dialogue with each other. I question inhabitation and transit of my body in a social political territory in relation to the other bodies through an intimate narrative and geographical determinate time and space. I will talk about this piece that is, it is a piece that was designed for an exhibition room of the Contemporary Art of Museum of Oaxaca. Oaxaca is a city well known for its cultural tradition, but also for its political problems. I take the issues of missing persons from the education worker sector. So I interviewed relatives of teachers who were disappeared or killed. The performance, while the audience listened to the audios, I drew the footprints of each visitor with the actual time of their visit. The performance lasted 5 days, simulating each day an 8-hour work day. In the end, the drawings were left as a permanent exhibition with the audios and the cenital video that invites the audience to reflect in terms of empty and full. The second image is a work that represents a new stage of topics to develop in my career. It's called Amoris Complex Expression. In this case, I am interested in to show a work in a public space with action where I could dislocate the organical time of the routine and to move the art pieces onto unexpected places, sharing parallel times with the spectator, where I reflect the materials through repetitive acts related sometimes to auto-reference that is mixed with the plastic influence, but above all Oriental film influence. This piece was part of a performance festival, which this project is part of a music festival at an airport. The proposal was 2 hours performance, and I was interested to address this topic, that it was related to the sound and it was related to love. So that it was difficult thinking in a context where the bodies or the audience is going to listen music, not to try to find a piece of art. The third image is ethereal action, that I start this piece with 1 kilo, and I would like to reach 365 kilos. There are several facts that interest me in this piece. One of them is the record of the change that the body will have over the years, and the creative level. I keep wondering how I will interact with 365 kilos of flour. This piece was, I did it in Ireland in a festival of contemporary art, but for me it was very, I was very curious when I arrived to Ireland, and I found out that in a contemporary festival, they put the performance in a black box theater. So for me, it is important how to create different, how to use the space, do not having problems between the section of theater or fine arts. So thank you.
Hello, my name is Sinéad O'Donnell. Thank you very much for including my work in this really exciting discussion about durational performance. I make performance art because it opens up unknown possibilities, processes, experiments, and research. It challenges normative perceptions of time, space, communication, and the body. Interacting and responding to identity, borders, barriers, through encounters with territory and the territorial. Creating actions or situations that demonstrate complexities, contradictions, or commonality between timing and spontaneity, intuition and methodology, artist and audience. Performance is a language and a communication that is constantly evolving, that acknowledges commonalities, differences, twists and turns, interpretations and interruptions. Unfolding over time, allowing the artist and the viewer to share an intimate space, their existence overlapping for the duration of the action. My performances develop over time, creating visual narratives through the lens of the female body. At times, I experience a sensation of suffocation, working through every inch of my being, up until I find a point of balance between the body and mind, material and action within the duration of an artwork. The location of where I make a performance or the theme that is embedded inside the performance informs how I approach my work. The location, this could be a church, an extinct sugar factory, a bench in a park, a jail, a gallery, a street, a community, a seashore, a festival, a residency, a collaboration, a coal pit, a city square, a rooftop, a library, a desert, a forest, a lagoon, a kitchen, a border, a river, a mountain, and so on. In these first two slides, it was I think it was 9-hour performance in two opposite cells in Communal Jail in Dublin, created by Anya Phillips. And it was entitled Future Histories. So between both cells, I had completely different materials to work with. In one cell, grass, turf, and in the other cell, charcoal from an extinct bonfire, from a prematurely lit 12th of July bonfire. And over the course of time, it became more kind of focused for me that what I was eventually doing was trying to disappear into the materials, and possibly the same way that the prisoners who would have inhabited the prison would have lived their lives. The significance of the project is that it marked the centenary of the Easter Rising in 1916, which was an Irish revolution. And within this jail, the revolutionaries were captured by the British Army, held in these cells, and then the majority of them were executed. I'm an artist that identifies as disabled, and this affects my day-to-day life. I explore the conflict I have of being dyslexic in a non-disabled or neurotypical world, and how this impairment informs my performance art practice. In this final slide of my work in Salt Lake City, I worked over 6 hours using A4 printing paper, and over time attached the paper with blue tape to a wall in the library. The blue tape was a representation of the color of a text font that is recommended for a dyslexic person to use. It's a type of blue. It's apparently easier for us to be able to visually read text. This piece was accompanied by a performance sculpture on display that I made of a pegboard design in the material of Irish oak, and it was based on a template from a 1975 model that was used for a test for dyslexia originating from research in the USA. I feel that time-based art is so valuable for audiences abled and disabled, because the body is the most immediate material an artist can use, and it is one that is most familiar to an audience.
Really great to see the images and your descriptions along with them. It makes me remember how much I'm missing seeing live performance.
Yeah.
So I get to ask the first question for this conversation, but then we're just going to let it follow where it goes. So anyone else with your questions should jump in. But I thought just to start with asking, what does using an extended time in a performance duration allow you to do in the work or to explore in the work? And it's, in a way, it's like what can't happen in a short performance that can happen in a very long one. So we should just jump in, start talking. Who wants to go first?
Like for me, I want to say that also I am dyslexic person. So for me, there are many things that it can be very complex. So the way that I learn in my life to be calm is the way that I start to understand time. This is the way how I lost fears on the social life. And performing every time more and more and more is a need that it's helping me to explore my brain, but also for the public, I take the time as an element that is part of the lecture that they will make. For example, in the performance I show about the 8 hours performance for 5 days, what I try to represent is exactly the problem that it was linking with the teachers, with the sector of the workers. So this is exactly that every time I try to make the element of time part of a reading for the full context.
I totally can relate to that, because I think if I'm making a shorter performance, for me it's a different thinking strategy, because when I can work over time, you can make decisions as you're working. As I'm making the performance, I can make decisions. If it's over a series of days, it's okay for me to have a different idea for the next day, or to start moving the materials around. So I think also when you have the opportunity to work over time, you can have maybe a template or a skeleton that you'll work with. You have your action and materials and maybe how to begin. But then I think what's really wonderful about it is the process takes over and the experiment becomes the work. And you just find all of these kind of hidden secrets about yourself and how you're connecting with the audience, the material, the light, whether it's raining, whether it's hot, depending how you're feeling. And it's kind of like you can enter into a safe space where you don't feel so impaired, because it's something that you feel so in connection with. I don't know.
For me, I think it is important also in relation with our speed, our daily speed, our world speed, about time from 00 to 00 clock, and I think also it's not only for me, it's not about endurance, which is actually also needed to have an endurance if we decided to do a long durational performance art. But for me, like as you said, Sinead, that the experience that is happening to me during making it is not just for me, because if there are audience and they and the audience and me are creating something together. So the process of changing for me is very important. How my body changed while I'm doing this, how the image changed while I'm doing my performance, how the space changed, how the smell of the space changed, and how we then merge between our presence and the idea of time is very, how do you say, liquid. I would say, I cannot express differently, but it's like it is something that in the spiritual knowledge, for example, I'm in my meditation practice, for example, it is also like to let go. First, you have presence, just you begin the first hour, the second hours, the third hours, you probably experience physically, mentally different. So everyone who is doing the long durational performance have a different experience of time, and as well as the audience. So I don't mind if people come in and out. So people can have also, I love the freedom also that the public can have, and the freedom to decide. In the short durational performance, it's like the public should sit there. It's very classical. It's traditionally like in the theater, public sit there and watch the entire performance and have a very limited space to enter their own space, their own space in their mind, in their body. So the long durational performance for me gives the opportunity to for myself and as well as for the audience to think or to find their own way, to reflect their own way, and to have this freedom. I think that's one clear idea, one of my idea of doing the long durational performance.
I also think about the time of materials, which, you know, and if you're and I think of your charcoal, Molati, how long it takes to really crush it, and how it transforms over time, and then it transforms you over time as well, visually. You know, all the dust taking over your very strategically chosen white clothing, so that we could see that change, I think. And I think materials have their own time, and we often try to make materials conform to our time, when whereas in durational work it can be the reverse. You can take the time of the material.
And also like an experience in watching your performance when you were in Indonesia in our festival. I was very and also when we were in Taiwan back in 2009, I was very impressed how a landscape can be created, a new landscape of how do you say mine, so that I'm very much entering your landscape. And so the intention of the work is probably, your intention is probably different than my intention when I saw, or my imagination when I saw the images that is growing like a landscape of mine. And I think that is for me very poetic, very how do you say, it's an offer to see the world in a different way, and without telling it, you know. And I think that's amazing. That's a precious moment, I think. And how about you, Paola? I saw another work of yours in here this time, when you push the eyes, I think. And then you back, and you know, like also kind of, you also do kind of repetitive actions in your long durational performance, right? So how do you feel when you were doing it? You know, like do you also grow a kind of a landscape in your mind, or?
Yes, I mean, for me, like to work with a material and to do a repetitive actions that it can be the same, it is a way to recognize the space, my body through the time, and little by little to understand how material can be changing. And there is a moment that it can be like a meditation, and I get into the different emotions, different situations with the public, with the space, with myself especially. And for example, in the work you are saying, I remember pushing the eyes, 7 eyes, from one side to the other one all the time, and with the same position for the certain time. And it was a moment that I was just watching like the energy of the people, and I was just crying because it was very emotional for me to be concentrated just in my fingers, pushing the eyes, and even if it was cold and it was the opposite, you know, I thought it was gonna be the opposite, that I was not gonna feel the hands, but I was feeling the hands and I was not feeling the rest of the body. So it was very interesting how my body was reacting in the opposite way I was thinking on the beginning. And I would like to ask a question to Marilyn, especially that she's
Sinead on the
working.
spot. Oh no, go ahead.
Okay, sorry.
No, please. And I'll think of a way to move it to Sinead too.
Okay. No, if you have been doing durational performance for many years, but if the term it didn't exist before, when was the first time that you started doing long durational performance?
That's a good question.
Well, and I was telling Paola when we put together the book on my work that just got published by Intellect Books, I had to make a list of all the work I had done since the 70s. I left out some things, not much. And I decided to organize it by types of performance. And that's when I realized that there was work that I was doing in the 80s that could have been called durational performance, but I didn't identify it as that, even though it was hours long. So, you know, I was also organizing, I was also designing some group performances, and some of those were the long ones. So I really didn't start using the term durational until I was doing solo work. So it's, you know, it's partly that shift between worlds and how the language changes over time, and how, I mean, when I was first doing performance, the term performance art didn't exist. You know? So,
Yeah.
and it was when, and really it was when I became, when I chose to present my work in galleries to the visual arts community, that's when everything fell into place for me in terms of how to talk about the work and how to identify it. And that I was interested in, you know, time and space and materials, which sounded a whole lot more like visual art.
Okay.
All right, Sinead.
Yes, madam.
Okay, do you, I've seen a lot of your performances, and I had a
I can
question.
smell your seaweed.
I had a question about when you actually choose your actions and materials, do you, and for other people too, do you choose those? It's like, what comes first, the duration or the materials? It's like, do you choose different materials or actions when you know you want to work for a long time? I guess what drives the work first?
Okay, so just speaking here and now and what's kind of in my head, it's like my head's a notebook. Everything is kind of a notebook. So I bought a couple of 100 black paper bags about this size. And I'm sitting looking at them and opening them and closing them. And I'm trying to figure out with this material what would be an action or what would be the duration of the material. I'm thinking, okay, it's paper. So if it's lash and rain, it's not going to last very long. So I'm sitting with this material. And then on a, say, for example, if you imagine I have all these different tables around me, one table has a quantity of black paper bags. Another table has rice paper, piles and piles of rice paper. And I like rice paper because when you submerge it into water, you can pull it out and it keeps its form. It's really strong. So I suppose I do tests, and at the moment during COVID restrictions, I'm working in different parts of my house. My garden has been like a temporary place to do things if I need to work with fire or light the bags on fire or light the paper on fire. So I suppose I do a lot of tests, but I don't necessarily plan the performance, but I like to get to know the material. So it's, I suppose in a way, it's like a toolbox for me. And I open my toolbox and I'm like, okay, or I have different traces of materials from performances in boxes. And sometimes I'll open the boxes and I'll look and I'll see what I have. So for example, I have been also working with dresses. If I can find something suitable for a performance in the local store. So this one behind me is from a 25-minute performance, but maybe when you look at it, it could be from a 24-hour performance. So I'm quite interested in how we record duration or how we also record an action through drawing or objects, photographs or video. I don't mean to be getting off the point. I think my answer is that I have about 50 or 60 different ideas. It could be from a material, it could be from, I could be up, getting up at sunrise and sunset to see what that light is like. Maybe that's the duration. It could be an invitation to make work as part of a program or a gallery or a festival or a residency. I quite like residencies because you get more time to play with time. So for example, when I worked in the jail in Dublin, I knew it was going to be, I had the option of working between 1 and 12 hours. So it was, I think it was 24 artists in different cells. And I kind of chose, I just kind of intuitively chose it. I can work very intuitively. So when it was coming up to deciding how long I was going to work for, I kind of just went, oh, I'll work from 12 to 8 or 9. And I just, that's all they needed to know. And then I start thinking about grass and the earth and grief and burial and, you know, not just revolutionary prisoners, but men, women and children being locked up in cells together and starvation and eating each other. You know, and the other cell was charcoal. I wanted to take something from Belfast. It was charcoal from a bonfire, the 12th of July bonfire. It's a fire that is a celebration of loyalist culture. So I knew what I was doing. The intuitive feelings I was having is that there was 2 different things happening. So I had to put them in 2 different cells and work between the 2. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I also have bought a lot of paint and I do strange things in my kitchen. And because we were on a lockdown, we could only meet outside. So I'm in my friends' or family's back gardens, looking at the garden thinking, could I make a performance there? And if I did, how would that work? And would their neighbors see us? So I'm constantly thinking about how to make work, you know, also how to manage it, because you don't just make a performance, you have to think about the management around it, you know, and also how to safeguard yourself and others. So it's huge. But so at the moment I'm working with paper, and I've also bought edible potato paper
Yeah.
So I'm eating it and I'm testing it and I'm figuring it out, but it doesn't mean that I'll use it really soon. It might be like 10 years time I'll go, oh yeah, I could use that now, you know? So it's not really, it's scripted in a way so I can make the work, but it's not scripted in a this is what I'm going to do way, maybe only up until a few days before I'm doing it. Because also it's important to be able to be in a space, because then when you're actually physically in a space, you can go, oh, that's what it is. That's what I need to do. And then the black bags you brought in your suitcase are just kind of pushed to the side, you know?
Yeah.
Interesting thing is about this pandemic time, right? My just recent experience, I encouraged myself to accept an invitation to be at the Bangkok Art Biennale, to be present with my body, my work across the border of more thicker than before because of the pandemic. It's much more complicated in terms of preparing the papers and all the checkups and all the PCR swab tests and limited validity of the test, and then being locked in a room for 14 days, 40 nights, 15 days, 40 nights. And I was thinking like, wow, this is, it is of course difficult. It is harder than my intentionally done long durational performance. It is because there is like a force, a pressure, that because of the condition of pandemic. So during my quarantine, I was thinking, I don't need material. Why not trying to be with my body? Just do with my body. And sometimes I think it was good to have this moment to get back to my body and have the feeling like, oh, what is the time and the body?
Mhm.
What are those materials that I have used in my previous performance work? And what does all this mean, our relationship with body, being, life, and art? And all questions come, and all the new physical symptom, because of special pressure and time that is like, I think it's not like just like in a jail. It's like something new, something strange, starting at from the 10th days, and some physical symptom, mental symptoms appear. So it is not like the experience of the long durational performance where we are aware, we are prepared with the concept or whatever the idea was and what kind of material. But at the quarantine is really something that that is that was missing also probably in my body. It was missing in my experience about time. And so when I went out, when I was released from the quarantine, I felt like I have an empty head. Like, shocked in the, as if, wow, Bangkok is a new world. I've been there many times, but then it was like very. It took me time to speak with people, to start speaking with people. Even I was released. I was immediately brought to another general checkup, blood checkup and everything, to the hospital, which took me like 4 hours, and then and then the work started, and then of course because of the biennale, we start working on the space and performance preparation and blah blah blah. But I was like somewhere else. I need to. This transition was very hard. It's not like normal transition that I flew from one place to another place. It's from the quarantine to the outward. and, and and of course it is new for us. I think I want to experience also, because how about the future of the performance artists doing who are doing performance with the body as the main medium? What would be the future if there is not much change, if there is like what so-called new normal? Is that our future, the new normal? How do we work with
Yeah.
our body
Well,
then?
that was one of my questions about, I mean, for the near future, for an unpredictable amount of time, our real option to do live performance is to do live performance on Zoom, as opposed to making videos of work, which is a different, which we've always, I mean, we've always had the choice to make videos and show them. But now the choice, if what we want to make is live performance, the choice is, yeah, in a public space that is socially distanced, if the lockdowns aren't too strict. I mean, right now in Boston, we're not supposed to be going out except to go to the grocery store, to go to the doctor. We can take a walk in the park, but always masked. So there is that option in a public space, maybe soon or occasionally. But then the other space is this,
Well,
to do live work.
well, recently I made work for Culture Night Belfast, and it was proposed to me, and I was during the first lockdown, and I was starting to really lose my marbles. And I said, right, okay, this would be great. So they brought in two people to film, and it was just me, the director of the space, and the two people to film, and it was great. I mean, I made the work I wanted to make, but it was so strange because of the lights and the way it was set up, because it was specifically to be filmed. I couldn't see anything.
Yeah.
Huge big light. I couldn't see anything. And the only thing I felt that like I gained from it as like an artist to move on with it was that when I looked out while I was making the performance, all I could see was darkness. It was just black. But I knew there was people there, but it was black. And I kind of felt, oh my God, this is really a mirror of even what we're doing now. We can't imagine or see who would be viewing this discussion or who will be viewing this performance. But one thing I have got a bit aggravated with is watching festivals and events that you would usually attend in person online, because I'm looking, that looks like an amazing setup, it looks like an amazing space, but I'm just not getting it on a computer screen. So I think that there's an investigation kind of to happen with how we're going to still remain to be a community and a network this way.
Yeah.
Because I really miss having other artists to make work with, of other artists who I don't have to explain to. They get it because they also make performance or they organize performance.
But this is also, I mean, this is a space. This is a particular space.
Yeah.
You know, to make work that is for this space. Live, and to have the viewer there at the same time that you're making it. How do you know, that's the question, I think, right now. Paola, you also are dealing with this question.
Yes, like for me also, I do video and photograph, and the way that I every time that I choose any language, the way that my brain works is totally different. And that's why I decide to stop doing objectual art and going through performance art, because it was personally the way that I was not having the linear time, and I was more organic with myself. So this is also that for me, it was very important when I'm doing performance. And now when I had some invitations, I decided to do a video performance, but for me, it's clear that it's an action that is made for the camera. It's not linking to a live performance. And to have a streaming action is kind of weird and complicated for me because I like to feel the presence of the audience. I like to have an interaction with people. And even if here in Mexico, I could go out and do performance because the restrictions are not so controlled as many other places. We have a really high problem with the pandemic. And I am asthmatic, so I'm not able to go. I need to take care about myself. And I don't feel so comfortable doing it by live performance. But the important thing is, as Melati and Junaid say, how we adapt ourselves with creativity to face this reality that historically it will be very important for our generations, you know? So for me, this is a new extension of the language, and I don't know how to call it. The point for me is if in internet we have so many images, so many information, how as an artist we can make the difference between what the person who is behind the screen is consuming, a regular video or a regular situation with all these new apps, with the art.
Mm.
Yeah.
It would be great to have a performance art channel.
Oh.
If they, it'd be like watching soap operas. I'd be like, oh, what's going on in Indonesia? What's going on in Boston? What's doing in Mexico City? You know, it could be your 7 o'clock to 10 o'clock TV feed. You know, I was thinking of that in a serious way, though. You know, but because all of you, you know, we've all have experience or have spent a lifetime like Marilyn teaching. How do you feel about the future of people who have yet to begin performance art, or students, or extending the kind of performance education? I know it's getting off the topic of duration, but like, is this a weird end in performance methodology shifting over to a digital lens, or what's going to happen to those potential practices?
I just taught a workshop, and it's like, where do you say you were teaching? I taught a workshop online for University of Alberta in Edmonton, Canada. But not everyone was in Edmonton, so it's like, yeah. So where were we? But it was a workshop on performance and the use of time in performance, and it was really interesting to work in this format. I hadn't tried it. I mean, there are a lot of people that have, you know, were forced to learn over one weekend how to teach online. And, you know, fortunately I have left my full-time teaching job long ago, so I didn't have to face that problem with such pressure. But the participants of this workshop could go outside and could do things outdoors as well as inside. And we were an audience for each other, and they were doing some of their actions live. So we didn't speak so much about actually doing work for this format, which I think is a different conversation. But perhaps I am watching the time, speaking of time, and I think that we're at our limit, and perhaps Cynthia could reappear. There she is. That's like magic.
Nice on the time, Marilyn. I wanted to jump in too and say, Junaid, the Performance Art Channel is a great idea.
Yeah, I wrote it down.
I saw you write that down.
The thing is because you said that, okay, so there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of us. We're all responsible for a little bit of that happening.
Okay, I'm in. And then I did want to speak to Marilyn's point about the workshop. I got to take Marilyn's workshop, and I've enjoyed this space of the digital space and learning and teaching performance art. And I think that, as many of you mentioned, being able to be in the body, like your experience here on your side of the screen is still part of the experience. So I think that there's still a lot that can be gained from this space and performance.
There's still hope.
There's still hope, yes. Well, great. Well, yeah, so I think we've hit about time. So thank you all so much for being with us tonight in your various locations around the world. And I'm just really grateful for the conversation, and glad to see you all together. So thank you so much. And
Thank you.
we'll talk soon.
Thank you.
See you on the
Gracias.
Performance Art channel next.
Yes, coming live
Yes.
from Boston.